Right now, somewhere near you, there is a pharmacy. Clean shelves, labeled bottles. A person in a white coat who studied for years to hand you something that will actually make you feel better. Normal. Boring even. Now go back 400 years, walk into the same shop and ask for the most popular, most trusted medicine on the shelf. The pharmacist nods, reaches up, and hands you a jar of brown powder. You ask what's in it. He says calmly, a person, a dead one, preferably Egyptian, ideally a few thousand years old. This was not a back alley scam. This was mainstream medicine. For over 500 years, the cure-all of choice across Europe, prescribed by real doctors, swallowed by actual kings, was ground-up human mummy, and the story of how that happened is one long, escalating chain reaction, set off by a single misunderstanding that nobody ever bothered to check. It starts, like a lot of terrible ideas, with a translation error. Far to the east, Persian physicians used a real substance called mumia, a black, tarry mineral pitch that seeped out of certain mountains, bitumen. They swore it healed wounds and mended broken bones, and honestly, it may have done a little. Crusaders carried the fad back to Europe, and demand for this black miracle tar exploded. But there was a problem. Real mountain bitumen was rare and expensive. And then someone looked at an Egyptian mummy, wrapped, blackened, coated in dark, hardened resin, and thought, that looks like the same black stuff. It was not. The Egyptians never used bitumen. They used resins and spices that simply happened to darken and look similar over the centuries. But nobody checked. The word for the medicine and the word for the embalmed body had quietly blurred into one. Mumia. And just like that, the cure was not a mineral anymore. The cure was the corpse. At first, they only wanted the black resin scraped off the wrappings, but a bad idea has a horrible momentum. If the coating heals you, surely the flesh underneath is even stronger. So they stopped scraping and they started grinding. The whole mummy, bones, skin, wrappings, all of it, pounded into a fine brown powder and sold by the spoonful. And people did not take it for one specific illness. Mummy was for everything: bruises, headaches, epilepsy, internal bleeding, stomach pain, the plague. Whatever was wrong with you, the answer was the same. Eat some of this dead Egyptian and call me in the morning. By the 1500s, you could not call yourself a respectable apothecary without a jar of powdered human on the shelf, sitting right there between the herbs and the honey. And if you are wondering why anyone believed a dead body could heal a living one, here was the logic. They thought every human carried a kind of vital spirit, a life force, and that it burned strongest in someone struck down suddenly in the prime of life, before age or illness could drain it away. Consume that person, and you took their unspent years into yourself. It was the oldest idea on earth, dressed up in Latin and sold as science. You are what you eat. They simply meant it, literally. And before you decide this was just desperate peasants, no. This went all the way to the top. King Charles II of England, the actual king, was so devoted to corpse medicine that he made his own. His favorite was a recipe called the Spirit of Skull. It became so tied to him that they nicknamed it the King's Drops. The main ingredient was exactly what it sounds like: 5 pounds of human skull, specifically from a man who had been hanged or killed violently, because a sudden, furious death was believed to trap the life force inside the bone. He had it crushed and distilled in his own private laboratory, mixed it with alcohol, and sipped it like fine brandy while he worked. And here is the detail that should stay with you. When Charles was finally dying, his doctors reached for the most powerful medicine they knew. They tipped his own King's Drops, distilled human skull, down his throat. 40 drops a day. He died anyway. The cannibal medicine could not even save the king who loved it most. And it was not only mummies and skulls. Once you accept that dead humans are medicine, you do not stop. Human fat was smeared on wounds and aching joints, and executioners sold it on the side. Moss scraped from the skull of an unburied dead man was dried and powdered for nosebleeds, and at public executions, you would find sick people waiting at the scaffold, holding a cup, ready to pay the executioner so they could drink the warm blood of the freshly killed, while it was still, as they believed, full of life. Picture that for a second. A crowd gathers to watch a man die, and some of them are holding cups. But here is where the whole thing curdles into something genuinely sinister. Because Mummy was a hit, everyone wanted it, and there are only so many ancient Egyptians in the ground. Demand outran supply, so the trade did what trades always do. It faked it. If you could not find a 3,000-year-old corpse, you simply made a fresh one. Dealers took the bodies of executed criminals, plague victims, beggars, the enslaved, the people no one would come looking for, stuffed them with cheap tar, dried them in ovens, or buried them in hot sand for a few weeks, and ground them into powder to sell as genuine ancient mummy. And the experts argued endlessly over which mummy was finest. The older and more Egyptian, the better, they insisted, grading corpses the way a merchant grades wine. A connoisseur's debate about the quality of dead people, held by men who, half the time, were unknowingly selling a stranger who had died down the road that very winter. So the respectable gentleman in London, carefully measuring out his expensive imported medicine, certain he was swallowing a pharaoh, was very often eating a beggar who had died in a ditch the month before. A French royal surgeon named Ambroise Paré wrote about it in open disgust, that people were being made to devour the mangled and putrid particles of the carcasses of the basest people. He could see it was madness. Most of his colleagues kept prescribing it anyway, and now for the part that should really make you sit up. During these exact same centuries, Europeans were sailing the world and recoiling in horror at the peoples they met, calling them savages, monsters, cannibals, for eating human flesh. While back home, the chemist on the high street was selling ground-up humans by the jar, and the king was sipping a dead man's skull in his study. They had simply decided that when they did it, with a Latin label and a silver spoon, it was not cannibalism. It was medicine. And this was not some quick medieval phase that everyone snapped out of. Corpse medicine stayed respectable for the better part of 700 years. It survived the Renaissance. It survived the birth of modern science. You could still order genuine mummy from a major European pharmaceutical catalog as late as the early 1900s, within touching distance of the world that gave us motor cars and electric light. So why did it finally die? Not because anyone proved it did not work. It never worked. It faded slowly as real medicine arrived, and the whole idea quietly became too grotesque to say out loud. But it is worth remembering why it lasted so long. It was not stupidity. These were the smartest, most powerful people of their age. Kings, royal surgeons, learned physicians. They ate mummies because everyone they trusted ate mummies, and not one of them wanted to be the person who asked the obvious question. The medicine was never in the powder. It was in the belief, which is the part that should make you slightly uncomfortable. Because every age is completely certain that its medicine is the real one, and that the people before them were fools. 500 years from now, someone is going to look back at something we swallow today with total confidence and wonder how we possibly did not know. We just remember the mummies. They will remember us.